Excuse me. Okay, see if this works. Basically, the bias, this is for the T-Lex, but the way the bias works is basically each position has its own bias. So if I click on position 1, for instance, it'll tell you the possible numbers here, how many times they've drawed in the total history of the game, how many games out they are, and what their averages are. The bias is right down here. It basically shows the history. So in position 1, which would be this column right down through here for position 1, you can see that it's keeping track of the history. The 0, 1, 3, 1, 2, same here, 0, 1, 3, 1, 2. So it's the history of the what digit come in the first position. If you click the second position, it'll do the same thing. It shows you all the possibilities, how many games out they are, what their averages are, and again, this is the history of it, which 7803440, 783, 7803440. The way I look at it is if you click on the history, it will show you the biased results of what generally follows these numbers. So I highlighted a 1, and all these numbers have followed basically the 7. And I mean, it's every possibility. But if you say how many times, what numbers have followed a 78, then it comes down a little bit and it'll show you how many games out and what their averages are. If you do a 780, you can see that when a 087 are the last, basically the past 3 draws, the only numbers that follow that are a 1, 3, and a 0. And you can see, but how many times out of 5,800 times, 780 has only been seen 4 times. If you look down through, this is the history of the entire base of the game, but you can only see however many's here. I don't know, 60 or something like that. I'm not real sure. I've never counted them. But out of 5,809 games, the 780 has only showed 4 times. So the bias on that would be a 1301. You can look at the history of like the 7-8. It's only showed the 8, and then the 7 came after the 8. That's only showed 45 times in 5,800 draws. If you do just the 7, what follows the 7, the 7 has showed up 561 times, and this is total for position 2. Overall, I'm not sure exactly. Actually, the overall would be, you can click these over here at the same time, and this will show you overall. It's analyzing less games, but it'll show you how many times that these digits have hit in position 2, and then shows you what their outs are. And again, you can look at the history and stuff of what the history is. It's kind of hard to explain how I use this to determine my numbers, because I really don't look a whole lot at this particular bias. I like doing followers. I don't know exactly where my little program is. I've got it stashed on another file somewhere that I was using to do my tracking. Let me look here real quick. I used something to this effect to see how many times where the digits are hitting. There's other programs out there that show you this. This is my Florida 536 game. It tells me how many times basically in the past 10 draws is all I'm using. On these numbers here, how many times it's hit, to help me decide which ones to play. But as far as the bias, if I use the bias for these positions, if I click here, I prefer looking at the averages versus the bias. To me, the bias, you know, the lottery's random. So if 7-8 has only come up 45 times, and you can count these here. These add up to 45, if I'm not mistaken. And you can see what the games are out and what their averages are. To me, if you look at just this bias of the 7 and the 8, you can see that there's really only 3 possibilities, 2 more so than any other. This one here is out 15 games. It averages every 5.6. So take 5.6 and times it by 3. That's going to give you like 16.8. So it's within 2 of its average whenever I do something, even though it's, you know, it's out 3 times what the average is, a little under that. So the average right now, if you tripled that, would be 16.8. The only ones I ever choose are ones that are within 2 points of their average. The other one would be the 5. The first one would be a 1. The next one would be a 5. It's currently out 4 games and it averages 5. So for my next game in position 2, more than likely I would pick the 5 for whenever I go to wheel my numbers. So for position 2, I would put a 5 in there. Then I'd go to position 3, basically do the same thing. I'm gonna click this just a couple times just to get my numbers down a little bit. I try to keep however many I click down here on the history. I still want it to show all of my numbers here. The 7-0 shows that it's hit 60 times. So I'll look at my averages here. I like the 1. There's only 4 of them, 5, yeah, probably 4 of them that would be considered played. You can see here that the 9 it's hit 7 times. Its game out is 8, but its average is 829.857. I don't know if that's correct or not. I doubt that that's right, being it's hit 7 times in 60 games. So there must be a bug in this particular position here or something for that to be that high. But basically I would look at these 3. The 7.5 is the most common one. So I like the 1 because it's right there at its average. This one here is 3 over its, or 3 over double of its average, or 3 under. So I wouldn't really consider that one. And again, the 6 is 3.5 less than its average. I only pick the ones that are within 2 of their average. So I wouldn't really consider anything but a 1 in this next position. So I'd click a 1, and then go to the 4th position. I'm going to click a couple. You can see where 3 9s in a row in the 4th position is hit. But in order to get, you know, because it's only showing if 3 9s in a row 3 times, it's either been a 0, 1, or a 6. But if I click to where it shows all of my numbers over here, you can see again there's only 3 really possibilities, which is going to be the 0, 5, or the 7. In this particular case, the 1, it shows that the game's out. So if you go down through the history of, sit here and scroll down until you find the next 9 together, a 1 followed that, basically. So what followed the 9 is the 1, which is only 1 game out. I hope that's kind of making sense. This one here is out almost twice its average, so if you double this is 12.2. So this in here would be one of them that I would consider, and the 7, because it's within 2 of its average. So I'd go 5 and the 7. So over here on my wheel, I'd click a 5 and a 7, and then for position 5, again, I'm going to click a couple of them, and then basically do the same thing again. I'm going to look at what the low averages are. You can see a couple numbers are way lower than the rest of them. I'm not sure why number 9 seems to be so high all the time, but it is what it is. I don't know if there's a bug in this particular system or what, but this is not quite within the 2. It's 2.4 out of its average. This in here is 4.9 out of its average. So in a case like that, I would look at a couple more, like the 1 again. If you double this, that's 24.4 or 24.5. So this and the number 1 would actually qualify, even though it's a high average, because it's out 24 games. So it's out double what its average is. And I'm just going to look down through here a couple more times. This would be a 32. So I would probably go with a 1 and a 4 in this particular case. So 5, I would go with a 1 and a 4. Basically, that's how I use the average. So whenever I run this particular program, it gives me 160 sets to consider playing, which is basically all these here. And then once you run your filters, I can probably filter that 160 sets down to 10 or 15 by the time I do my filters. But basically that is the bias. It's looking at the history. Again, this is, let's do position 5. You can see in position 5 the 446615, 446615, and it basically, the bias is showing you what has followed. If I just click 2 of them, these numbers here have followed it. If you go down through here and look for another pair of 44, which has only happened 49 times, like I said, there's been, right here is a 44, and the first number after that was a 5. Well, that's where you're showing your 5. So basically, the bias is what has followed however many you highlight. If I highlight the 446, then the 2 would be the next one. So if you went down through here and looked for a 446, unfortunately we can't keep going off to the side. But here's a 44 and there's a 5 that followed. Here's a 44 and there's a 5 that followed. So you can see that, 2 back-to-back 5s. That's basically how your bias works. It's just asking you, if you click, you got 2 back-to-back 44s, so a 5 is more than likely going to be drawled in the 5th position. I don't think I had a 5 in the 5th position. I had picked a 4 instead. So if I click the 44 and then go over here and look at the 5, it's because it's hit 2 times in a row, but it's the lowest average number. So a good bet would probably be to add a 5 in that particular spot. So in that case, whenever I run that, it gives me 240 numbers, and I can probably reduce that down to 15 or 20 numbers by doing a filter. If I take a filter here, it looks at them 240 numbers right there, and then if I just change a couple of these filters, I can reduce that down. Well, I don't want to reduce. There we go. That reduced, and the way I look at this is there's only 3 numbers that I would play in a situation like this. These are basically the stacks of what has previously hit. So the stack filter A, if I push it, I can look at the biased on it the same way. This is a filter. So whenever I look at the filter, there's only a possibility of a 0 to a 5. So whenever I'm trying to decide for my A filter, what do I want to play? Well, you can see 1, 2, and 3 are the 3 hardest hitting. If you go down here and you look at what has followed a 2-2, the last time was a 5. The couple times previous to that were 2s. So in this particular case, I could throw a 2 in here. So whenever I go to run my filters, it's going to filter everything down to a, and the supposed, the trick to this one here, obviously a 2 hits in that second in the B position is quite common, obviously by the amount of hits. But if you look at the bias down here, if it's just a 3, a 2 follows. If it's a 32, then it's a 1-0. If it's a 324, and you can see how many times this is hit. You can look at your averages. In this particular case, I would think that would be a 1. So I would make that a 1. So whenever I run my numbers through the filter system now, I'm down to 14 numbers to play. So I can save them and then view them, and that'll show you what 14 numbers that it recommends playing for tonight. And that would be for tonight's draw, because this is updated. So you can take a look at them numbers right there for the Florida Fantasy 5. See if I'm even close for tonight. Just gives you an idea how the bias works. So try that. Hopefully that makes some sense. If not, I'll try another video using maybe this program here, which is the Digit Master Pro program. And you can see here where I've got filters set to exact specifications, other than a couple of them. A couple of them I run a spread on. Over here I don't really worry about the second column. I just leave them always the same. But here I will look at, and I don't know why I don't have a bias on this, but it doesn't show me a bias for this particular one. And that's one reason why I've gotten used to, like the ID, which is independent digits. This is for the Mega Millions. You can see that the 5, 6, and the 7 are the most common ones. So you can look at how many games out. So by rights, that should be a 5. So in order for it to make less numbers, you can go with an absolute. You can get your bias on these by right-clicking. This shows the history of what has been drawed for the independent digits, and this bias is the same thing down here. You can see that the 6 is showed 402 times on this game. The 6, 7, what follows the 6, 7, and you can see what generally follows. Down here again, you can see what, the more that you click, the less hits that it has, just because that particular pattern, the 6, 7, 6, 6, you got the 6, 7, 6, but then it was a 7. You got, your 666. It's 6667. So in order to find that pattern, it's only hit 24 times out of the history of however long the Mega Millions has been at 5 and 75. But like I said, whenever I'm choosing my bias, you can see in this particular game, basically you only have 6 digits here, between 4 and 9 independent digits. So here they don't count the first digit, 0. It's not considered a digit. If it's less than 10, it only counts the 1. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which was the last hit. So we had 6 independent digits. Because that 3 has hit in multiple positions, it only counts as 1. Because it doesn't count repeat digits. It only counts the independent, as far as the independent digit goes. So independent digits, the last draw was a 6. So what follows the 6 the most is actually, looks like another 6 would follow a 6. So over here, instead of that being a 5, it should be a 6. So where you make it a solid. In this particular setup that I had done for tomorrow night's draw, I ran it between a 5 and a 7. And still got left with 13 numbers. So, but anyway, that's how the bias is working. It basically just looks at, if I had the 676, that pattern has followed in the history 52 times, and these are the numbers in that 52. If you add these together, this will add up to 52, and this is what has followed after that pattern. And this was the last number that followed that pattern. The time before that, it was a 6. The time before that, it was a 6. The time before that, 5, 5, 5, 6. So anytime, if I go way over here, the first time that a 676, the next digit that followed the very first time was a 7. After that, the next time a 676 came up, then a 6 followed. So there's 52 numbers. This should, if you count that, I don't know how many's here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There should be 52 of them right there. And you can count them if you want. I'm not going to sit here and count all 52 of them, but there should be 52 numbers right there. And these are the numbers that have followed the 676. That's basically how you use the bias. It's basically just figuring up what has followed however many you click. If I click the 6766, it's showed up 24 times. There's 24 numbers right here. So the first time that the 6766 came up here, the first time, the next digit after was a 6. The next time it come up as a 6766, the next digit that followed was a 5. And then the next time it come up, so on and so forth. So hopefully you understand that. Hopefully it makes some sense. I just rattled on forever. Hopefully I didn't confuse you and you do understand what's going on now as far as the bias. So there you go.